No makeup today, kids. It's getting real. Hey kids, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, welcome to my channel. My name's Amanda. I make videos about movies, TV shows, books, and writing. So I spent the last week reading A Discovery of Witches by Deborah Harkness. I was actually really excited when I bought this book. I actually think this was in a book haul that I did not that long ago. I finally read it. The premise sounded super interesting, right? You've got Diana Bishop, who's a descendant of Bridget Bishop. She does not use her magic because her parents were killed when she was 7, and she hasn't used her magic since. So she is a historian who specializes in alchemy. She's at Oxford working on a keynote speech that she's going to be giving in the following months. I think it's like November, and I think the book starts in like early October, and she's supposed to be giving the keynote speech that November. So she's at the Bodleian Library taking books out of the stacks and studying them and all kinds of scholarly stuff, right? Little does she know that one of the manuscripts that she calls up, Ashmole 782, is enchanted, and it's been lost for several hundred years. So she's able to call the book up, she opens it, she gets a look at the first page. The first 3 pages of the book are missing. She gets freaked out because she can sense that the book is enchanted, and she sends it back in the stacks. And apparently, literally everybody under the sun has been looking for this book, including a 1500-plus-year-old vampire named Matthew. That's not his name, it should be though. Matthew Claremont. And she and Matthew embark on a journey to figure out what all is in the book. So I have mixed feelings about this book. I also want to say that I know this book is apparently extremely popular. A lot of people love it. Not so much. I didn't hate it. There were some things about it that I really enjoyed. That's a better way to say it. There were some things about it that I very much enjoyed, such as the vampire lore, at least some of it. I really love how she took some of the more common myths about vampires and kind of disproved them. I've seen some people reference this book as like a Twilight for adults. I gotta say, man, I actually think Twilight was better. I mean, don't get me wrong, Twilight definitely has its faults. However, at the very least, it didn't try to pretend something that it wasn't. This book kind of presents itself as like an urban fantasy with some paranormal romance mixed in there, but really it's just a romance. Beyond that, it starts off right away. I mean, we start off going with Diana to the Bodleian Library where she takes out Ashmole 782 for the first time and starts to look at it. I mean, it literally starts right away. Like, that's the plot. It literally starts right away. There's no preamble. Then we meet Matthew. And of course, we're already expecting a romantic subplot, right? So we meet Matthew. They had their little like antagonistic bout where he tells her that by her pulling the book, it's going to attract a lot more creatures because so many people have been looking for it. And sure enough, the next day she comes into the library and there are a few more creatures than normal there. Other witches, there's demons, there's vampires. It's like an all-out freaking creature fest. Meanwhile, Matthew has also been looking for Ashmole 782. So of course he's going to want to help protect Diana, but I think it's more than that. I think he's like attracted to her right away, which fine. Okay, you can be attracted to somebody right away. That's usually what, inspires you to like go out with them or whatever. But this, he breaks into her room to try to look for the manuscript while she's sleeping. And then after he's done and can't find the manuscript because she sent it back to the stacks, he watches her sleep. Remind you of anyone?
I like watching you sleep. It's kind of fascinating to me.
You psychopath!
This is a strawberry wine, by the way. It's from a winery in Connecticut, or an orchard, whatever, orchard. It's like 35% strawberry wine, 65% grape wine. Strawberry wine is freaking amazing. If you've never had it, I highly recommend it. This is pretty good, I'm not gonna lie. But I think I like the straight strawberry wine better. But it's good. It's bubbly. So anyway, they have their little like antagonistic, oh, I don't need you to protect me. Here's the thing. I read somewhere, I don't remember if it was like on Goodreads or if it was like one of these You know how they have like the quotes from like magazines or publications like the New York Times or whatever, or even like quotes from other authors who have read the book. Somebody referenced this book, A Discovery of Witches, which by the way is book 1 in a trilogy. Somebody referenced it as a character-driven story. I like me some character-driven stories. All day I like character-driven stories. But here's the thing. These characters, they're not really that interesting. Diana doesn't like to use her magic. She's super powerful. She likes rowing. She likes yoga. She likes running. She's a historian. And she starts off the book like super independent and like girl power. But then as soon as she falls in love with Matthew, like all that goes out the window. One thing I did like a lot about the book was the author tried to take like a scientific approach to explaining some of like the witches and like vampires and like their origins, where they came from. So I really liked that, which I thought was super interesting. I think it got a little bit science-y a few times there. But, I mean, I'm here for it. Like, show me how smart these motherfuckers are. All day, bis. Here's the thing, though. I fail to see how any of that ties into the plot, even though it could so easily tie into the plot. Because at one point, Diana learns that at least one group believes Ashmole 782 to be where the origins of all the creatures lie, like where that information is. It's in Ashmole 782. I don't know. I mean, the plot was just so slow moving. Mind you, this book is almost 600 pages, and at least 300 of that, there is literally nothing happening. Nothing. So people are after Diana, witches and vampires alike. There's this one vampire, Domenico, who has like a real hard-on for her. And then this witch, Peter Knox, who is like part of something called the Congregation, which essentially is 3 witches, 3 demons, 3 vampires who sit on a council and decide the laws of the creatures, if you would. And it strictly prohibits vampires and witches from being together. I mean, I think it's supposed to be like an allegory about racism and the idea of interracial couples, which is ironic because in the novel there are a lot of interracial couples. There are 2 prominent ones that I can remember, and one of them I'm pretty sure is going to be super important in the next 2 books. At least I hope, because I seriously am considering purchasing the second book, despite the fact that this book was so slow. And so my watch begins. I guess maybe that's like a genius move though on Deborah Harkness's part. Because literally, bro, like the plot is so slow moving. It's a lot of description about Diana like waking up and eating breakfast and going to the library and seeing creatures and Matthew being all protective, and then like she sees more creatures and more Matthew. So many descriptions of wine, because vampires in this universe love red wine. They drink it all the time. And they also eat food. Like they eat actual food. They don't just feed on blood. They can eat actual food and, you know, enjoy it. So long as the food is uncooked and no veggies. Fuck veggies. No veggies for them. I mean, they're vampires, so they have like heightened senses anyway, and they're in perfect health because they're, I don't know, like fucking frozen. But they eat nuts, they eat berries, they drink wine a lot, and they, I don't know if they're all wine connoisseurs, but that's like one of Matthew's character traits. He's a wine connoisseur, so he like knows all the different types of wine, and he's got like, you know, wines from like the 1300s or whatever, which, don't get me wrong, that is cool. Like, that's a cool little character trait to give, and the author does a really good job at showing that he's a wine connoisseur. Here's the thing though, she shows it too often. Literally every time they drink wine, Matthew is interrogating Diana. Well, what do you smell? What do you taste? Which is sexy the first time. Maybe even sexy a second time, like a while after the first time. But girl, literally every other page, they were eating, drinking wine. She like made dinner for him, and she made like a 3-course meal, but I don't know, maybe it's just me. Maybe I've just never been to like a fancy enough place to like have this kind of 3-course meal. But she didn't give him like your typical 3-course meal, an appetizer, an entree, and a dessert. She gave him 3 entrees, and from my recollection, no dessert, except for nuts and berries and, you know, more wine, because yes. Also, Matthew really loved to name drop. Again, this is something that, like, if he does it once or twice, then you could be like, okay, maybe he's trying to impress her a little bit, or, you know, maybe it's just trying to show, you know, how old his character is, that he knew such and such a person. But, I mean, he name drops, like, I mean, like a guy who just really needs to get laid, like, really. And the weird part of it is that they never bone. And the craziest part of that is that there were at least 2 times where I was like, oh, they're gonna bone. They are so gonna bone. But they didn't bone. And not because she didn't want to, because he didn't want to, which, granted, that's fine. Like, I'm not knocking that at all. But there was no real reason for him to not... Like, every one of his actions, every one of his thoughts, every kind of emotion that Harkness chose to show showed that he really wanted to bone her. But there's really no reason for him to say no, other than he's really old and apparently thinks that, you know, since he has an eternal life, that Diana has an eternal life. He actually says it several times, we have plenty of time, which, in the context of we have plenty of time, let's not rush this, let's wait for it to progress naturally, I 100% agree. But it progressed naturally twice, Biss! Twice! And you didn't do anything. Like, what did you do? You literally, like, you kissed her, you kissed the crap out of her, right? And then you're like feeling all on her. At one point we got some hand jibbers, but even that wasn't done, you know, I don't think to my taste. Listen, you don't have to get super graphic with your sex scenes. You don't even have to make them that long. But more than 2 sentences, and a little bit more descriptive than just, oh, his hand reached down and I like was euphoric with pleasure. No, like, you don't have to get super graphic. And if you don't want to get into the physicality of it, like, you don't want to get graphic, I'm fine with that. But give me the emotions, please. I mean, like, literally, this is supposed to be a love story, though it was hidden in like an urban fantasy. It's like a paranormal romance, so fine, so give me that. Like, I want the feels. I want them. Give me the feels. They spend, no lie, about 300 pages in France literally doing nothing. And, like, okay, so at this point, someone has broken into Diane's rooms. Somebody also delivered a set of pictures to her front door, which were pictures of her parents, like the crime scene photos, the really graphic crime scene photos. And Matthew quickly assesses that she is in immediate danger, so he says, okay, well, we gotta hide you, which in my head makes perfect sense, right? So she says, okay, well, I want to go to my aunt's, because she's really close with her Aunt Sarah. So she says, okay, I want to go to my aunt's house, obviously. And he's like, no, they'll be looking for you there. Let's go to my house. Let's go to, like, my mom's house. Okay, it's in France. Nobody will know that you're there, and we can just regroup and, like, you know, think about what we're gonna do. Okay, fine, let's do this. Take me away, Matthew, to frickin' France. Septours is the name of the castle in France, which, cool. We're gonna get to like look at like a French castle. This is freaking awesome. We're gonna get to like know a little bit more about Matthew's history and maybe hopefully, you know, move this plot along a little bit because not really a whole lot's happened. I mean, the thing is, this was 224 pages in. Okay? And the only plot points that I've mentioned are basically the only plot points that there are. I need to slow my ass down. But anyway, we get to France. Matthew's mother is there. Now, I should say it's Matthew's mother. She's the one who turned him into a vampire. So it's kind of the way like Carlisle is Edward's father. Isabeau is Matthew's mother in that same sense, that she was the one that made him into a vampire. So she's there. She mostly resides in the castle now. And also their housekeeper, who is also an ancient vampire and yet is still a housekeeper. Because we're told fairly early on that vampires tend to be very rich, which to me makes perfect sense because they've lived all these years. It's really unlikely that they wouldn't have saved at least a little bit, but even if they saved a little bit at a time, considering how many lifetimes they've led, I mean, it only makes sense that they would be very rich after a certain point. And this kid is like 1,500 plus years old, so, you know, I mean, he's taking private jets and shit, so So to me, that's not like a, oh, of course they are. Like it just makes sense. It makes sense, guys. But the thing is, if that's true, then why is Marthe, that would be the housekeeper, Matthew and Isabeau's housekeeper, why would she still be a housekeeper? I just wish that her motivation for her position had been just a little bit clearer. There was ample time for her and Diana to have like a one-off conversation. And there was plenty reason for Diana to ask Marthe, hey, let me ask you something. Matthew mentioned that, you know, being a vampire, it's kind of a given that you're probably going to have a lot of money just because of the amount of lives that you lived. My aunts say the same thing. Why are you still a housekeeper? If you wanted to stay with that family, sure, okay, I get that. I completely get that, loyalty or whatever. But why are you going to still be their housekeeper? Like, why not adopt or, you know, bring in another housekeeper and you're just like part of the family? I don't know. Weird. I don't know. I would have really appreciated that little like factoid. And who knows, maybe in like book 2 or 3, we'll get that explanation, but I don't know. And then like literally nothing happens in France while they're there. Except Diana floats while she's dancing with Matthew. Like she can fly. And then he leaves. He has to go back to Oxford because somebody has broken into his lab. So he needs to go see what happened and like, did they take anything and blah, blah, blah. Is everybody okay? So she stays in France, and at this point he's like, oh, we can't be together. So we're not going to break like the treaty. So he's like, we're not going to be together. We're not going to break the covenant. Oh my gosh. And then she freaking cries, and she literally cries us a river. Like her tears are like turning into giant like water drops as soon as they hit the ground. She's like flooding part of the tower, and like she tries to like call out to Isabeau and Marthe, and her like she opens her mouth and like freaking water comes out, like she's throwing up water. She like reaches out to them and there's water coming out of her fingertips. Like, really? This book was definitely a case where the TV show did it way better. It's a lot more fast-paced. The representation of the magic is done much more, ironically, realistically, just in the sense of I can wrap my head around this. I cannot wrap my head around water coming out of somebody's freaking fingertips unless you give me an adequate explanation as to how and why. or unless you establish it as something possible in your universe. So it turns out that freaking Diana is like the witch of all witches. Like, she's got all the power in the world. Really? Really? But she refuses to learn about it? I don't know. I'm not gonna lie though, like, there was enough in this book that I kind of want to read the second one, which I've read is a lot more fast paced. Because and that doesn't really surprise me, because this entire book is all set up. Nothing happens. Like, nothing happens. We end the book with Diana and Matthew time walking, which is essentially time traveling, which, let me just say something about the way that they explain time traveling. So they kind of explain it in a way that makes sense, but Diana points out a very, very, very real concern, and that is that the physics of it do not make sense. She actually says the physics of this time walking thing doesn't make sense. I just really thought it was lazy for the author to put this in there, only to have the other character, who is Sarah, Diana's aunt, who knows more about witchcraft and magic than Diana does, to say, oh, well, I don't have time to explain the physics of it to you. Like, the way that they time traveled, they didn't make any kind of mention about not interacting with their past selves because they could screw up time or whatever. Like, it's like it took them out of time and just replaced them with the future selves, if that makes sense. I don't know. It was just done very, it was just very, like, haphazard, last minute. That's another thing. Like, a lot of the magic in here, there wasn't very much of it. The few instances where there was magic, it just, I don't know, it was like everything but the kitchen sink. Like, everything but the kitchen sink. It's a very open, soft magic system, which I don't normally mind if it's done well, but in this case, it was just so, I don't know, it felt like the author just kind of wrote it in as it came to her, which there's nothing wrong with that in your first few drafts, but with a final product, it really shouldn't read like that, at least in my opinion. And I mean, it does. I started watching the TV show when I was about halfway through the book. I watched just the first episode though, because I didn't want to spoil myself. I finished the book last night and I was like, okay, now I'm going to keep watching the TV show. I'm on episode 4 and they're already about halfway through the book. So the show is absolutely wonderful. It's much more fast paced. The way that it's edited and the different perspectives that we get on the show, it makes things just that much more clear as to what's going on. I highly recommend that you watch it. It's not on any streaming app, but you can purchase it on Amazon. I purchased it on Amazon. This isn't a sponsored video, by the way. I happen to use Amazon Prime and I love it. But I bought it on Amazon. I think it was like $20 for the whole season 1. I can't drink another glass, so I think that's where I'm going to end the video. I also have some exciting news with regard to my debut novel called The Eldest Witch. I have already been in touch with an editor and we've already got plans for me to send her the manuscript. She's currently working on another manuscript and I'm trying to finish up draft 4 of The Eldest Witch, but I'm going to be sending it to her within the next week, and I'm equal parts excited, equal parts terrified. This is a person whom I have, admired for some time, and I really appreciate her professionalism and her honesty. Draft 4 was a giant, I don't want to say rewrite, because it wasn't so much a rewrite as it was like moving scenes around, to different spots in the timeline, but even still, I had to rewrite basically the entirety of the last 3 chapters, which is fine with me because I feel like the story is a lot more streamlined now, just in terms of it being concise and like very obvious what the motivations and what the story is. So yeah. But I don't know, it's still nerve-wracking. It's nerve-wracking, but I need it. I need an outside opinion at this point, and I need an outside opinion that's going to be, very detailed in their opinions and very precise with, you know, things that they think could be better and etc, etc. So yay. But anyway, that's all I got for you today, kids. Thank you guys so much for watching. Give me a thumbs up if you like the content today. But I'd like to hear your thoughts on this book if you've read it. If you haven't read it, just watch the TV show. It's so much better. It's much more fast-paced. It's going to keep you engaged. Definitely watch the TV show. You can read the book if you want, but I'm just telling you, get ready for like a whole lot of nothing to happen. Something to happen in the beginning, then a whole lot of nothing, and then something to happen at the end. Let me know down below if you have read A Discovery of Witches. Have you also read the 2 subsequent books, and what did you think of those? I do think I am going to be purchasing the second book because, again, I've read that it's a lot more fast-paced, it's a lot more action-packed, and I am interested. I do want to just freaking know what is up with Ashmole 782. Like, I still want to know. If you have not subscribed already, the subscribe button is literally right there. Ding the little bell so that you get notifications every time I post a new video. I post usually on Wednesdays. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you next time.